What's up, guys? Tricks Ridiculous back with another video, and in this one we're going to be covering some Tiny Tina's Wonderland news. Now, if you don't know, just because this is my first video on Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, if you don't know what the game is, it is a brand new AAA release from the creators of Borderlands, Gearbox Studio. It is not a DLC, it is a full standalone AAA game, and it has a Dungeons and Dragons theme, okay? But it is still following the looter shooter genre of Borderlands. So if you've ever played a Borderlands game in the past or you like looter shooter type games, definitely check this one out. It comes out the 25th of May. But what Gearbox has done is just the other day, they actually released all of the characters, all of the classes, full skill trees. So I'm actually going to just go through each of them at a very high level. We're not going to dive too deep into each one, but just wanted to give a little bit of a high level overview of what each character class kind of brings to the table and where I think some are going to excel at different aspects of the game. Now, the way this works, if you haven't been really following, Wonderlands, basically you're going to be able to pick one of these 6 starting classes to start the game with, but as you progress through the game, they say pretty early on in the game, you're actually going to be able to dual class, okay? So you're going to be able to pick a secondary class and then essentially level up a skill tree, for both. So you could make, a Berserker Clawbringer, a Spellshot Stabmancer, a Spore Warden Graveborn, whatever combination of 2 of these 6 you want to do. That's how the character creation in this game is going to work. All right, so I want to just quickly look at each of the different classes. We'll start with the Berserker. All right. Now, the reason it's called the Berserker is because it is a Berserker style character, heavily focusing on melee, but the Burr part is because it is a frozen kind of ice, cold, frost-infused sub-theme, right? Now, this is kind of what each of the skill trees look like. I'm not going to go through every single item on the skill tree one at a time. A lot of these are just general boosts, gun damage, status damage, movement speed, those types of boosts, all these ones that go up to 5. What I'm really going to focus on is this top piece. This is called your class feat. It's basically just a passive ability that is unique to your class. And then these 2 boxes here, these are your action skills. So every class is going to have 2 action skills. It's essentially your super. It's your ultimate, right? And you can pick which one you want on. So you're going to have 2 different options with each class. And then the last one I'm just going to go over is the very bottom skill. This is called a Capstone skill. It's just a passive skill. Usually, sometimes it's active, but it's essentially just like the defining upgrade for the class. When you fully leveled the skill tree, that's kind of the last thing you get. So the reason I'm only going over those is because those will give you the best kind of understanding high level of what the build is kind of intended to do. And they are very different between builds. Now, like I said, remember, you're going to be able to pick 2 of these. So as I'm talking through them and kind of saying where these builds excel, you can kind of start to think about how maybe this one might pair with another one, or, maybe I'll start with this one and then work in a different build. So that's what we're going to go through. So starting with the Berserker, you get this class feat, Rage of the Ancients, all right? Using an action skill causes the Fatemaker to become enraged, adding additional frost damage to their attacks. Enraged duration will not deplete while an action skill is active and ends if your Fatemaker enters Save Your Soul, which is basically when you die. Activating an action skill when already enraged restores a portion of the enraged timer. So basically, just kind of a passive ability that anytime you activate your ultimate, you get this damage bonus, right? Bonus frost damage. Okay, so to pair that with our action skills, we actually have 2 to choose from, as they all do, but one of them is Dreadwind. This is your standard spin to win, right? It's a spinning slash, just kind of a spin your axe, very classic, like Diablo style, and you just kind of melee everything around. You get bonus movement speed and slow immunity. This sounds like it can be a really good kind of close quarters piece, or maybe single target DPS, right? And then Feral Surge. This is another interesting one. So the Fatemaker leaps in the air towards their target, dealing frost damage to all nearby enemies. Any non-boss enemies damaged will be instantly killed if their total HP is less than a certain percentage. So if anyone's in kind of a kill range almost, even if it wouldn't be enough to kill them, as long as it's below a certain percentage, it will do an instant kill. Now, we don't know all of the percentages or numbers right off the bat. We don't know exactly how much the enrage, bonus frost damage is. We don't know the exact percentage. But in general, this is, seems like it's meant to be more of a crowd control, type thing. And the last piece on here that really brings it home, if Feral Surge kills an enemy, its cooldown is reset. So as long as you're using this on like smaller enemies, right, and you're doing enough to kill even one of them, you're going to get it back. So you should be able to spam this over and over and over again, and especially, using this or having this Rage of the Ancients while you're enraged, right, you're going to get that bonus frost damage. And then when you, let's say you get your action skill back already, you activate it again, you're going to get, extension on that enraged timer as well. So you should, assuming you're, going to be able to kill things one after the other, and again, this is a little hypothetical, but that seems like the intent. You can kind of chain this and just kind of stay spamming your ultimate here with this ground slam, and then just staying in that enraged bonus damage at all times. Really, really cool. Definitely like a melee focused, in your face, as it sounds, a Berserker type skill. And then coming down just to the kind of the capstone skill. So it's called Blood of the Fallen, and it is a kill skill. So you'll see kill skill, quite a lot. These are essentially skills that, as they sound, activate when you get a kill. So any kill, anytime you kill any enemy, this is something that's going to basically happen, right? And you'll see this, throughout a number of different skills when you go down the skill tree yourself. So the Fatemaker's remaining action skill cooldown is reduced by a percentage, right? So that's your ultimate. You're going to get a reduced cooldown on your ultimate every time you kill anything. And if your action skill is already active, then the duration is instead extended, right? So if you're using, let's say you're using the spin to win one, and you start killing guys, the more guys you kill, the longer it's going to last, right? And as I talk about this, remember guys, this is just for the Fatemaker, right? Or I'm sorry, for the Berserker, right? Your character can be a Berserker and a mix of something else. So as we continue to talk through this, think about that, right? Like you can pair this with a different ultimate from another class, right? You can mix and match pretty much any two ways you want. But overall, these are some pretty cool skills. If you really like being kind of in your face, spinning an axe, doing ground slams, and then really just keeping your ultimates off a cooldown. It sounds like you'll be getting them back pretty regularly. Definitely the Berserker is one for you to start, and she looks pretty badass as well. All right, moving on. Next one is going to be the Stabmancer. So the Stabmancer is a sneaky, crit-focused assassin who summons magic whirling blades to the battlefield and disappears into the shadows at will. All right, so the class feat here is Dirty Fighting. It's a pretty basic one, but obviously powerful. The Fatemaker's critical hit chance is increased. All right, so you just get a flat crit hit chance for playing this class. Nothing too fancy, but I think we all know how powerful that is. All right, coming over to our action skills. Now, the first one's called Ghost Blade. The Fatemaker throws out a Ghost Blade, which spins in place at the target location, wherever you aim it, dealing melee damage, right? So obviously going to scale with your melee, periodically to nearby enemies based on the Fatemaker's equipped melee weapon. So it sounds like, obviously it's going to scale with whatever your melee weapon is equipped. And I'm guessing if your melee weapon has, maybe an element to it or some type of effect when it deals damage, that might also translate to this as well. Pressing the action skill while Ghostblade is active causes it to teleport to the targeted location and reduces its remaining duration by a small percentage. So a little bit of a penalty for doing that, but basically you can, when you put it down, it kind of stays in one place. But then if you want to move it to maybe a different area where enemies have now moved to, you can teleport it, but it'll reduce the duration by just a tiny bit. But it sounds like you can kind of move it around, get some kills with it, and then be done with it. Pretty cool super there. And then the next one is called From the Shadows. The Fatemaker enters stealth, turning invisible. While in stealth, all damage dealt is automatically a critical hit, but deals less damage. So, when we say a critical hit deals less damage, again, like I said, we don't know all of the exact percentages to a T right this minute. But that's still pretty good. I mean, entering stealth, turning invisible. I don't know the duration of how long it is, but this can be a very, very powerful single target super, right? If you go into stealth, that, you know, turning everything into a crit, that's definitely going to be an absolute DPS monster when it comes to single target. It seems like this is going to be pretty mandatory for unloading big damage into a boss or anything else. And then coming down to the ultimate here, or the capstone, I should say, Executioner's Blade. So guns and spell critical hits have a chance to create an ethereal blade above the target that will impale them after a short delay. Ethereal blades deal melee damage based on the Fatemaker's equipped melee weapon. So this sounds like it's going to be extremely, extremely powerful, again, for a single target, okay? So basically, every time you crit with your gun, with any gun, or your spell, right, which is kind of works in this game, if you don't know, kind of like a grenade cooldown, like from Destiny. It's just, there's no limit to them, but it just goes on a cooldown. Anytime you hit with any type of critical hit for that, there's a chance to basically do extra damage equal to your melee damage, right? So basically, this ethereal blade will just come in, it'll do whatever your melee damage is, and that can trigger on every hit. So I'm imagining if you scale a lot of melee damage with this, and then use kind of a high fire rate gun and high crit chance, which we know you're going to have, or even with your ultimate for the guaranteed crits, as long as you're scaling that high melee damage, I can imagine getting this, assuming there's no internal cooldown on it, getting this to trigger over and over and over again. And if you have high melee damage, that could be some big, big damage, especially if every single thing is a crit. So that can be really, really interesting. I think overall, the Stabmancer sounds to me like definitely the single target damage class. And like I said, maybe you're thinking of going Stabmancer to start. Maybe you play a different character and then you realize your single target damage isn't quite there. Maybe then you can multi-class into Stabmancer and really get that extra single target damage. But definitely Stabmancer, really, really cool class. All right, moving on. Next one is the Spore Warden. So the Spore Wardens are masters of nature who can summon tornadoes and launch volleys of arcane arrows into enemy lines alongside their toxic spewing mushroom companion. So this is meant to be kind of like a wind elemental character, but also poison. So think like wind poison, all right? So for our class feat, we have a companion, a mushroom companion. So we're accompanied by a mushroom companion that follows us around basically and will target nearby enemies, dealing poison damage. Pinging an enemy will cause your mushroom companion to lunge towards them. Any increases to the Fatemaker's damage also apply to their companion. So basically, you just get a little buddy that you can kind of control who he attacks, but in general, he's just going to attack whoever he can. And then the stronger you get, the stronger he gets. So that's a pretty nice passive. And I think a couple other ones have companions as well, but pretty cool to just have that companion passive on your side, just kind of doing some passive damage while you're doing your thing. All right, looking at these action skills. So first one is Barrage. The Fatemaker summons an ethereal bow, firing 7 arrows that deal ability damage on impact. Arrows ricochet twice between nearby enemies. And the Barrage actually has multiple charges. Increasing gun damage applies to damage dealt by Barrage. So this super scales with your gun damage. I assume it'll scale with, because you can have multiple guns equipped. I assume it's whatever gun is in your hand at the time is going to affect how much damage this Barrage does. But this is really interesting, and this sounds to me like definitely a crowd control skill, right? Again, we're not sure exactly how much damage it's really going to do, but what it says to me is, they ricochet twice. So you hit a guy, it's going to, all 7 of these arrows, they're going to hit a guy, go to a nearby guy, hit him, and then go to a nearby guy again. That's 2 ricochets, all right? So basically every single arrow you fire out of this Barrage is going to hit 3 people, basically. That screams crowd control to me, especially because it has multiple charges, right? So you're going to be able to hold, store a couple of these, we don't know how many, and then kind of use them, as you see fit. This is really interesting. This could definitely pair well, I would imagine, with like the Berserker's ability on any kill to get back some of your super, right? With those multiple charges, you could probably keep spamming these over and over. That's what I would imagine. That sounds pretty sweet. And the next one here is Blizzard, right? So Fatemaker creates 3 Frost Cyclones for a duration that seek out nearby enemies, dealing frost damage over time. So really sweet. You kind of just put out these 3 Cyclones. They do frost damage, so they're going to freeze people. And they're just going to kind of mosey along the battlefield and just seek out enemies and just do their thing for a period of time. Really, really cool. We'll have to see, you know, how long they last, how much damage they do before we can really, you know, speak to their viability, but it could be interesting. This could be good depending on the size and the speed of how fast they move and how many guys they hit. This could be really good crowd control, or, you know, if all 3 of them can be on a boss for a period of time, this could be really good single target as well. We'll have to see. But overall, pretty solid, sounds like, anyway, a pretty solid ultimate there. And then coming over to the capstone. So play the angles. The Fatemaker's gun critical hits have a chance to ricochet, dealing reduced ability damage to a nearby enemy. Ricocheted shots have a small chance to ricochet an additional time. So basically what this is saying is that anytime you deal a crit with just a normal gunshot, there is a chance that that shot is going to ricochet and also hit another enemy. And then there's even a small chance that it'll ricochet even a second time. Really, really cool. Now, obviously, you're going to want to scale this with crit damage, right? And who has crit damage? The Stabmancer, right? Or I should say crit hits and crit chance, right? So I could totally see these 2 pieces playing very well together, especially you know, with the Stabmancer's kind of invisibility to be able to do those guaranteed crits. And then while you're doing all guaranteed crits, having that ability to ricochet all of your crits to other enemies, and then also having that extra melee damage whenever you do crit. I could see those 2 playing really, really well together. But overall, Spore Warden, pretty cool build. All right, moving on. Next one is the Clawbringer. So this is kind of like the Paladin. Clawbringers are faithful warriors who bring down thunder and flames upon their enemies with a spectral hammer alongside their fire-breathing wyvern companion. All right, so looking at their class feat first, this is similar to the mushroom companion we saw, but it is a little dragon wyvern companion. So the Clawbringer is accompanied by a wyvern companion that flies through the environment and attacks enemies with its claws and fire breath. Any increase to the Fatemaker's damage also applies to their companions. So pretty straightforward on this one, pretty similar to our mushroom guy. Basically just a passive little guy that'll come around and just do some fire breath damage. Now, as I say this, you know, there's probably some skills in here. You can see even some skills that have the images of this little wyvern guy. So there's definitely some, you know, pieces or ways to upgrade what he does and some of his abilities. And I'm guessing the mushroom guy and other guys, you know, same thing. I'll let you guys, you know, take a look at all that yourself. I'll leave the link to all of this down in the description. I probably should have mentioned that before. But basically, definitely going to be ways to do that. So take a full look through the skill tree if the class sounds like something you're going to want to play. But, you know, the class feat, the action skills, and the capstone are really just kind of will give you the best sense of how the character is going to perform. All right, so coming to the action skills. So Cleansing Flames, the Fatemaker summons their hammer and slams it onto the ground, dealing melee damage and creating a massive fire nova, dealing fire ability damage to nearby enemies. So basically, this is just like your Fist of Havoc, right? You just grab your hammer, slam it on the ground, probably a pretty massive AoE, big fire explosion, right? And fire damage to all nearby enemies. Definitely a close range thing, it sounds like. We'll have to see, you know, how big that radius is or exactly how it works. But definitely a close range, but being able to kind of hit a wide swath with that fire damage, I imagine, you know, gonna ignite guys, right? So they'll take some damage over time as well. Really, really cool. And then Storm Dragon's Judgment, the Fatemaker summons their hammer and hurls it, dealing lightning ability damage to all enemies it touches. It sticks wherever it lands and deals lightning melee damage a second time to all nearby enemies. The Fatemaker can recall the hammer, damaging enemies along its path, ending the action skill early, refunding a portion of the cooldown. So the way I read this, it obviously sounds kind of like a Thor, right? You essentially summon your hammer, you have to aim it, I imagine, and then you just hurl it. Anything it hits through, right? So you want to line up your enemies, hit through with them, It'll do lightning damage to all of them, and then wherever this thing lands, it's going to stay there for the duration of this super and just deal lightning damage in that area. Maybe it's like a damage over time or something like that. What you can do is you can recall the hammer, right? So then anyone still in the path on the way back is going to get hit again. And then if you do it early, you're going to get a portion of your super back. You're going to get some of that cooldown back if you end it early there. So that could be pretty nice as well. And then coming over to the capstone, so it's called Storm Smite. Whenever the Fatemaker activates an action skill, they call down elemental bolts that deal fire ability damage or lightning ability damage to all nearby enemies. So basically, that seems pretty sweet. So as long as you're activating your ultimate frequently, you're going to be calling down fire and lightning damage all around you. So obviously, as a no-brainer, this is going to pair well with ultimates that activate frequently, right? You're going to want to pair this with a quick cooldown ultimate. Coming to mind off the top of my head, the Berserker, right? With that feral jump, the jump that if you kill an enemy, you get it immediately back. You pair that with this, and it's basically just going to add fire and lightning elemental bolts to those jumps pretty much every time you do it. Also, the Spore Warden, you have that barrage ability that actually adds, that has several charges to it, right? That could work really well with this as well. So that'll be a pretty cool pairing, I imagine. Moving on, the Spellshot. So the Spellshots are gun-toting wizards who can unleash a constant barrage of spells and bullets and transform their enemies into harmless livestock with the snap of a finger. So this one is a little bit of a tricky class. I imagine this might be a tough class for people to pick up their very first time playing, just based on how I read this beforehand. But let's go through it. So your class feat is called Spell Weaving. Casting a spell or reloading a weapon grants the Spellshot a stack of Spell Weaving, increasing spell damage. Spell Weaving stacks automatically decay after a few seconds. Casting a repeating spell has a chance to award additional Spell Weaving stacks with each repeating cast. Now, a lot of this might sound a little sideways, a little bit foreign language right now, because we don't really know all of the different spells that are going to be in this game. And that's what that's what this class will rely upon, and how you're going to really need to build it. So you're going to need to kind of know what spells you want to build around going into this, right? And, just as a reminder, spells in this game are going to kind of work like grenades in Destiny, right? So, basically there's not going to be a number to them, but they're just going to be on a cooldown. And then every time it's off cooldown, you can essentially reactivate it. That's essentially how it works. And there's all different spells, and it's actually an equipment slot, right? So as you find new spells, you can equip a new spell, and then that's the spell you start casting. All right, so coming to the action skills, though. So Ambihextrous is the first one. So the Spellshot may equip a spell into their action slot skill. Whenever the Spellshot presses the action button skill, they cast that spell. So this is a pretty basic but powerful skill. Basically, this is letting you... So at current, every character gets one spell slot. You only have one spell that you can cast as your kind of grenade spell, right? The Spellshot has the ability to forego a super in place of a second spell, right? Now, obviously, that works with the Spellshot because of how they scale with spells pretty well. But again, it's going to be dependent. We'll see how good this is dependent on what spells. Maybe there'll be two really good, epic or legendary spells that people find that can pair really well together. We'll just have to see. There's just not enough information to make a call whether or not this will be good. But next one is Polymorph. The Spellshot turns an enemy into a skeep for a few seconds, basically like a little sheep. If that enemy is immune, the Spellshot instantly casts a free spell on that enemy and gains 2 free stacks of Spell Weaving. While Polymorph is active, any player that damages the skeep has a chance to cast a free spell. This effect is guaranteed the first time the Fatemaker deals gun damage. If the Spellshot can cast a free spell this way, they gain a stack of Spell Weaving. So, little complicated here. Basically, this can turn any enemy into a little sheep person that doesn't do any damage to you for a couple of seconds, basically for the duration of the skill. If they're immune, meaning if it's like a boss or something, or it's just an enemy that you can't actually do the ability to, then instead it's going to give you, it essentially is just going to count as a free spell, and you're going to get 2 stacks of your spell weaving instead of 1. But while the polymorph is actually active on the enemy, players can still damage that enemy, and then damage to it has a chance of that player just activating a free spell. So you turn a guy into this sheep, and then everyone unloads on him, and everyone's going to be casting spells nonstop while they're doing that gun damage. And for the spell shot, the very first bullet you shoot is guaranteed. So you're definitely going to get at least 1, possibly more for the duration. And then, of course, if you cast your spell this way, you get a stack of spell weaving. That's just going to you're just going to keep seeing spell weaving over and over. This sounds pretty good. I guess we'll have to see. I imagine you'd want to use this. You're not going to just use this on every skeleton enemy you see. But, on bigger badass enemies that are not bosses, but still very difficult enemies, this can be a pretty solid, DPS. You'll definitely want to make sure you're coordinating with your team. Definitely better in a group than solo play, right? To be able to say, hey, I'm going to turn this guy into a sheep. Everyone focus your fire. Boom. And then you get some massive damage, for a period of time with all those spells. But we'll have to see. Very interesting ability there. And then coming down to the capstone, so Sever the Thread. Gun critical hits have a chance to instantly reset all spell cooldowns. This skill has a short cooldown. So as it sounds, anytime you get a crit with a gun, there's a small chance anyway, that your spells, whether it be 1 or if you have 2 equipped, will completely come off cooldown, allowing you to recast them again instantly. This is really good. This sounds really cool. Now, there is a short cooldown to that, so it's not like you can probably just go, crit spell, back to back. There's probably going to be a little bit of a cooldown on that to prevent that, but, getting your spells back pretty quickly. Again, we'll have to see just how powerful spells are, in comparison to guns. But overall, this is a very interesting class to play. It's really tough for me to say, who this class can kind of pair with compared to the other classes. This seems like the most lone wolf type of class, in comparison. So I don't know. It might be interesting. I'm curious to see how it plays and what spells, because there are going to be a lot of different spells in the game to equip. Going to be interesting to see, how you can really make this work. And then the last one here is called the Graveborn. So the Graveborn is a death-touched acolyte who sacrificed their health to unleash devastating dark magic attacks and become the phantasmal reaper of bones, accompanied by their manic DemiLich companion. So, class ability, another companion-based class feat. So DemiLich Companion, the Fatemaker, is accompanied by a floating DemiLich Companion that targets enemies at range and deals dark magic damage. Whenever the Fatemaker casts a spell, the DemiLich will cast Hellish Blast, creating a homing projectile of the spell's elemental type, dealing damage to nearby enemies on impact. And of course, any increases to the character's damage will also apply to the companion. So again, just another nice little guy here. They do pair a little bit of synergy with spells as opposed to the other 2 companions that do not do that. So maybe a little bit of synergy there with the Spellshot to be able to kind of spam spells and have your DemiLich. I assume, through the skill tree, you may be able to upgrade the damage of your DemiLich and then have him really going crazy if you're also going crazy with spells. All right, so coming down to the action skills. So Dire Sacrifice. The Fatemaker sacrifices some of their current health to deal dark magic damage and apply dark magic status effects to all nearby enemies. Dire Sacrifice deals bonus damage proportional to the amount of sacrificed health. So a little bit of a risk-reward one here. You're going to sacrifice some of your health to do kind of a big AoE blast, right, to all enemies nearby. Obviously, the more health you sacrifice, and I'm sure the more you kind of level this up, the more you're going to actually be able to do to enemies. Now, like I said, obviously sacrificing a lot of your health, that could be interesting. Maybe, you know, you'll have to pair this with something that has some life leech, maybe a weapon or some type of skill tree, whether it be on this skill tree or another that has some life leech. So, you know, you're not going to die immediately upon sacrificing some of your health. But usually effects that sacrifice health to do damage do substantial damage. So I assume the damage on this is probably pretty high. And then Reaper of Bones. The Fatemaker is fully healed, obviously upon activation of this. Gains leech efficiency, so that's damage on hit, leeching effect. And deals bonus dark magic damage for a short duration, but loses an ever-increasing amount of health per second. When the Fatemaker would die, they become invulnerable for a duration, restore some of their health, and Reaper of Bones ends. So this is an interesting skill. This is kind of like, I read this as a bit of a get out of jail free. If you think you're going to die, you know, panic slam this ultimate. You will go to fully healed, right? And then you'll gain, you know, damage on hit, but slowly you will lose an increasing amount of health. So you're going to want to try to out damage the health loss as much as you can, but eventually it'll take all of your health. And then when you would die, you instead become invulnerable for a period of time, and then that effectively ends your super there. So the invulnerable, I assume it'll just be a quick, you know, 2 or 3 second invulnerable, restore some of your health, basically just giving you time to kind of get back out of there, so you don't just completely, it doesn't just end on you and you're dead. But really interesting kind of, you know, again, kind of a get out of jail free type of ability there. And then coming down to the capstone, Morheim's Blessing. Casting a spell automatically activates all of the Fatemaker's kill skills. Now, we didn't really go through all of the pieces here, but basically the kill skills, you know, like I said, it's anything that you get a kill, it activates. That's how it works. And some of them they're some of the most potent abilities in all of Borderlands. This is really interesting. Obviously, if you can stack and pair this with, obviously, I'm sure there are a lot of kill skills on their own, you know, skill tree of the Graveborn, right? However, there will probably be more on other skill trees as well. So you're definitely going to want to pair this with another skill tree or another class that also has a lot of kill skills. That way you can activate, you know, one of your spells and just get just a complete overload of all your kill skills and just go completely Super Saiyan. This can obviously be really good. It's generally just really good, but also can be good for like kind of long drawn out boss fights where maybe there's not an enemy in the area that you can kill first to activate all your buffs, right? So you need to actually use your ultimate, get all those kill skills, and then you can go to town on the boss. Anyway, that's all of the classes in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. I'm still not sure. There are a lot of choices to choose from. I'm not sure who exactly I'm going to start off with, but I can already think of, you know, just looking at some of these skills, these ultimates, and these capstone abilities, I can see some major synergies between a lot of these different classes. Gonna be fun to play. I'm definitely gonna be bringing you guys a lot more coverage of this game, a lot more builds, playthroughs, playing with viewers, all that good stuff. And yeah, I'm probably gonna end up doing every single combination possible. So really, really excited for that. I think it's gonna be a really fun time. I'm a huge Borderlands, you know, nerd for years and years. And this one kind of bringing a fresh take to the genre with the Dungeons and Dragons theme. I think it's going to be absolutely awesome. Really excited. Let me know down in the comments below what your starting class you're thinking is going to be, and then what are you thinking for your tie-in multi-class later on. Let me know down in the comments. Be sure to like this video if you do like this Tiny Tina's Wonderlands content. Subscribe if you're new, and consider joining the Discord as well. That's all I've got for you guys in this video. Hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.